Hi, I'm James. This is a blaster. I wanted to build something else from the Star Wars universe, so I chose to build a blaster. Last time I worked on lightsabers, and I figured, it's an appropriate step. I haven't worked my way up to building like a full Mandalorian armor set, but I have to accept that's coming sometime in the future. I based this one off of Clint Eastwood's gun in the Dollars trilogy. Since the Star Wars movies are so heavily influenced by old westerns, I figured it makes sense. You can see I've added the wood inlay and the metal inlay, but instead of a rattlesnake, it is a krayt dragon. It's because, I'm a nerd. But the rest of this is all just bits and pieces that I've cobbled together. And that really works for the Star Wars universe. So I'm going to give you a couple of tips about how to build something like this for yourself. Alright, first tip I'm going to give you about building something like this is where to find the parts. Now, looking at a blaster, it might seem like it would be either expensive to build it or it would be very difficult to build it. And happily, neither is really the case. Because you're going to be doing the same thing that the people that made the movie did, at least for New Hope. Because at that point, they didn't have a lot of money to make this film. And I've actually read that they just went to, I suppose, like a prop house and rented a bunch of World War II firearms and just put a bunch of crap on them that they could remove and then return the guns. Nowadays, they have unlimited resources and they can design guns from scratch and print them out and sculpt them out. But before, it was just whatever you can find, taped to whatever else you could find. And that is what you're going to be doing if you're going to build one at home. Now, you could find the base of it, preferably like a BB gun, because those look pretty good, but they're cheap. This was a really nice, inexpensive one that I got online. You can go to a sporting goods store, or sometimes I think hobby stores, or a garage sale and find a cheap BB gun. And heck, go to the toy aisle and find a Nerf gun that looks cool. But if you start with that, then all you gotta do is find the stuff that you want to add to that. Now, you're gonna be looking mainly at hardware stores and hobby stores. Those are the two best places to find neat little things to put on the outside of the gun. And when you start off with something like a BB gun or a Nerf gun, a lot of it is going to be plastic. With the BB gun, it's wonderful because you've got like a metal frame, something nice and sturdy and hefty that feels, real in the hand. But it's going to have an outer shell that is often high quality, like a resin or some kind of plastic. It doesn't just snap in the hand, but it's still easy to drill into and cut through. And that's what I've done with this one. I've gutted it. I've removed the chambers for the bullets. I've torn out the barrel. Basically, the only thing that's really properly intact is this back here. And the only thing this does now is like this bit moves this bit. The CO2 cartridge is filled. There's no place to put the BBs, no place to fire them. You can see the front half of the gun, that's mainly just dimmer switches and bits from the plumbing aisle. The cylinder is completely cut out on this thing and it's replaced actually with like a steel pipe coupling with copper wire wound around it, and the panel over it used to be part of the chassis of an RC car with a lot of cutting done. It's actually the part that took the longest time to modify. I went through like an entire episode of watching Creature Features to get that done. And this is just a wood inlay with a metal inlay. That was a bit tricky just because I sculpted the krayt dragon inlay and had to mold it in silicone and then cast it with just lead-free solder. And if you're doing any kind of prop stuff that involves cool-looking metal work like that, lead-free solder is great. I've made a Mudhorn signet with that stuff. I did sculptures on the outside of the lightsabers with it. It's easy to find. Make sure you get the lead-free version. You do not want to play around with a bunch of molten lead. That is not good for you. But it melts at a low temp. You can melt it on the stovetop. The silicone can handle temperatures that high. And you can actually get this done, go from sculpt to finished project in just one day. So, good stuff. And this part is just paint. Just nice, just Testors enamel spray paint. If you don't look too close, it looks like metal. So, keep it at a distance. The other thing to look at is just whatever junk you got lying around. If you're wanting to build this, there's a really good chance you've got just a whole bunch of crap just sitting around, be it electronic or old toys or no longer working RC cars, and those are wonderful resources. You should kind of blank your mind out, look at it, not for what the object is, but what it looks like, thinking, okay, well, that part looks kind of cool, I bet I could tear that off. And happily, usually, you can. Right, next tip is tools that you're going to be using to make this thing. And that's another nice part about this. It really doesn't require much. This is a jigsaw. Put the blade here and pull the trigger, and preferably you have it clamped down. I only needed this because of the wood inlay that I put under the handle. Without that particular part, you don't even need to use one of these. Even so, it is not that expensive of a tool. One of the other problems you might run into is workspace. But I live in an apartment. I don't even have a workbench to clamp anything down on, and I was able to make that. It's a lot of vacuuming afterwards and promises to your significant other that the living room will in fact return to a livable state. But it's really not that bad. And like I said, you don't even need one of these unless you're really going kind of fancy with it. And what I said about having a workbench, true. And using a jigsaw while just trying to hold the thing still, admittedly, that was a really stupid move. But it worked, and I still have most of my fingers left, so it's awesome. You only lose like a tiny bit, and it's nothing. The other tool that I used was this. This is a Dremel. This thing you can find at any number of stores. The hardware store will have like a million different kinds of these things. And this I used a lot. You can buy the little wheels that'll cut plastic. You can cut little pieces of metal with it with the proper bits. You can actually shape the wood tremendously well if you're doing that. Also, you can shape the plastic. You can shave off labels. You can do all sorts of things to modify your blaster with it. And it's something that you don't actually have to spend a lot of money on. I got this one for like $60 or $70 of the whole little range of tools. But this is a nice like name brand one. And I got a good one because I knew I was going to use it. But go to Harbor Freight or garage sales or whatever discount aisle you could find at any hardware store, and you could probably get one pretty cheap. I know my dad would get one from, I suppose, Harbor Freight or some discount store, maybe Big Lots, for like $20. So it's not like a huge investment. And if you burn it out on this project, then you burn it out on this project. You spent 20 bucks and you decide, well, I like that tool, or no, that was a terrible experience, I'm never going to use it again, and I hate you for mentioning it. But it's not a lot of money for that. So all in, you will spend like less than $100 easily making this entire thing. You probably go significantly cheaper. If you've got a garage full of garbage just sitting there, you could probably make this thing absolutely for free. Because that's the wonderful thing about the Star Wars universe, is that everything has that cobbled together feel. That's the point. The rebellion looks like they're just taking stuff, slapping it together, hoping that it doesn't explode on them, but it can make something else explode in the near future. And that's the glorious thing about it. It's also why Star Trek stuff is gorgeous, but it's a pain to make because everything is so sleek and obviously designed and shaped. It's also perfect looking and shiny. It's wonderful, but the Star Wars universe is a lot easier to kind of, cosplay. All right, you've got all your bits and pieces, you've got your tools, you cut everything out and fitted it together and thought, okay, well, that looks very cool. How the hell am I getting everything to just stay together? Now, choosing a base that has some plastic on the outside can make this a lot easier. It actually makes it ridiculously easy because you've got three really good options. One is the obvious one, glue. You find a good plastic glue, like model glue, I think forms a weld bond. It like slightly melts the plastic of the edge, and that way it's actually plastic bonded to itself. Two-part epoxies are almost always a safe bet. They will hold damn near anything together. They're pretty wonderful. Use them outside because they reek and they can't be good for you. But that is a really good option. The other one is, since everything is pretty much plastic, you can just screw everything together. If you've got a Dremel, you can just get a little drill bit for it. If you have just a regular drill, go to the hardware store, buy a little $2 packet of wood screws, or if you've got a tap and die set, bolts are nice because it gives it a nice machine look, but again, it's not super necessary. Just drill in, sink a screw, goes through just fine, plastic will hold it. That's what this one is held with. None of this is glued together. This is all bolts and little screws that I had sitting around. And some of them, like this, can add something to it. It looks cool. It looks like it belongs to the Star Wars universe. It's little accent bolts like that. With this, I went a little bit fancy because it has some threads on that end of it, that brass piece there. So I took a tap and die set, and I took a little bit of steel rod, added some thread to that, screwed it in, and it's held in with a bolt held way back here, just because I wanted this to be good and sturdy. If I ever make a proper costume to go with this and to go with this, yes, so much fun. I need to decorate this. Then I'm going to need to be able to pull this out, because if you're going to a convention and you're having fun with it, I'm going to do something stupid and I'm probably going to drop it, and it's going to need to be tough enough to withstand my clumsiness. But all in all, yeah, you can put together something that's fairly hefty and it'll work nicely. The other option that you have is this stuff. Just good steel wire. This one isn't super heavy. It's pretty thin gauge. You can get heavier gauge stuff that comes in these just kind of like big, not huge, but spools about that size, only about that thick. Go to the hardware store, go to the aisle where there's nuts and screws and where they have the stuff for hanging pictures, and you will find 100 feet of this stuff for like $7, and it's a good heavy gauge steel. And you can get whatever one bends easy in your hand. Don't get the stuff that it's tremendously difficult to shape. Make sure you get something that fits with whatever your hand strength is, because you don't want to torture yourself making this. You want it to be fun, and it doesn't have to be something that can, like, hold a human's body weight. Just has to hold together and look cool. But you can also use that stuff for armatures. If you're doing little collectible sculptures like I like to do, one of the pains is finding good armature wire. And the art store will charge you like $17 for 5 feet of wire that's too weak to hold anything. You can use that steel wire. You've got 100 feet of it. It is way better. So yeah, just save your money and get that stuff. But those are your options for actually holding the blaster together. And any one of them will work, or a combination of them will work. I used some epoxy to hold the wood inlays into the handle. Everything else is bolted together. If you want to just take wire and wrap it around and hold something in place, again, that works with the Star Wars universe, because it's supposed to look like you're either a rebel who's put together a blaster from bits and you're repairing it in the field, or a smuggler who's just like, well, that works, let me put this together. I live in Mos Eisley, everything here is crap anyway, so why not? Everything's supposed to look beat up and repaired and kind of just cobbled together and all messy, and it's great. Everything looks like it has a history, and a little bit of messiness definitely helps tell that kind of story. So whatever you find works for you. Lastly, the best tip I can give you for this kind of thing is don't be afraid of any part of this. And it sounds cheesy. I'm not like Bruce Wayne's dying father giving him advice laying on the ground or something. It's silly to say, oh, don't be afraid of this thing, but it can be intimidating. You get the bits and you think, well, this is the first time I'm trying this out. Where do I start with this? Dive in. Absolute worst case scenario, you've bought like a $20 like foam dart gun and found some crap in the garage and you cut the dart gun in half and it's like, well, nuts, I'm now out like 20 bucks. And even if you screw up on this thing, it's fine. Because you're using these things as base parts. You're not using them as their completed selves. If you get a Nerf gun or a BB gun and you mess it up and it's like, well, this is no longer work, it's just a chunk here, it doesn't matter because that's not a BB gun anymore anyway. It just means that your starting piece is a different shape now, so you redesign a little bit, add something else there. Usually, anything like that where you can make a mistake and you decide, well, okay, well, how do I fix this? It triggers something in your mind. It makes your brain be more creative. That's why sometimes lower budget movies will be amazing because they have to find creative ways around certain obstacles, and it turns out way better than if they had an unlimited budget. Same thing here. If you have to think of a way to fix this, your brain will come up with something, and 9 times out of 10 you look at it and you think, holy crap, that is way better than what I had in mind. And it's the same thing with this. I'll go into these things with a loose plan, but nothing super concrete. Rarely will I go into a project and say, this is exactly how this is going to look. Because I know what a pain that is. At some point, the material is going to decide it doesn't want to listen to you, or your hand is going to slip, or something's or it's going to fall off a shelf. You know, just no project will go completely unhindered. Something is going to go wrong with it. And it's usually a great opportunity to do something a little bit better. Like with this, I had to cut this part to mount the scope. It was just a pain to mount this thing because I had another bit that would add on top, and I put this on here because for some reason in the Star Wars universe, every single pistol has a scope on it. Don't know why, but it looks cool. And honestly, I think more than anything, it was a way to hide the fact that it was a World War II gun underneath it. So they're like, well, put this on it, and yeah, put a rifle scope on it because, you know, they usually don't see that. But everything in here was just placed on the ground, and you look at it and you think, okay, well, will that fit there? Well, no, that won't fit there. Let me screw this in and try this. And don't be surprised if you do an hour work and you look at it and think, well, that looks awful. No, I can't do that. And then just switch things around a little bit. Okay, well, I'll change that part out. Oh, well, yeah, that works now. And finally, surplus parts. If you go to the hardware store and you think, well, that looks cool. Well, that looks cool too. If it's cheap, go ahead and grab it because you might use it, you might not, but you will end up with a little like library of cool little bits. I've got a little tiny bucket of just cool looking parts for stuff like this because the next time I build something, those parts will come in handy. This worked well, this worked well. I wasn't sure which one was going where. There's another couple little bits that I had just in case that didn't work out. This, same thing. I thought, well, that looks cool. I don't know if I'll use it though. The deciding factor is look at the price tag. Well, that's dirt cheap. If it's like a $30 part, yeah, give it some thought. Because once you buy like 10 pieces, that can add up. But if you just buy a bunch of like cheap stuff, it's fine. Same thing with any little plastic bits. Go to like the hobby stores and go to the toy stores and look at stuff that is as cheap as possible. Because chances are there's a good little piece in there. And with plastic, you can cut it apart and shape it however you want. So certainly don't be afraid of any of that stuff. Because like I said, the worst you'll end up with is a bunch of parts that can still be used. They're just in a different shape now that you've cut them apart and tried to shape them into something else. If they don't work well with this, they'll work well with the next project. Alright, well hopefully this has been a little bit helpful to you. I mean, it may just be a bunch of nonsensical nerd ramblings, but still, that's always fun for me. But hopefully you can try this project out, give it a shot, or look at it and decide, well, no, that seems like too much work, I'll just buy one. Screw it. That's also an excellent option. There's some really good replicas out there. But there are a few things as fun as making something like this for yourself. And you can make it however you want. And that's the fun part. Instead of buying a replica of somebody else's blaster. The next step up would be building my own so it has the feel and weight of something real. But the step beyond that is to design your own. So now instead of, oh yeah, I've got this thing like this, and it's based on another character, and oh, I can pretend to be him, or I'll go to a convention and I'll wear a costume of that person. Now, you have something for your own character that could fit in the Star Wars universe. And that's just so much fun. You can do what I did and reference characters from other movies. There's something satisfying about something that you designed yourself from the ground up. So give it a shot, see if it works. If it doesn't, turn it into something else. Either way, as long as you're having fun with it and you learn something from it, then you've done it right. And that's true of pretty much any art project. Even if it turns into something that you absolutely hate and you throw it out, if you learned something from it, then it's great. It was a success. It was totally worthwhile. So have fun and, watch more horror and sci-fi. It's good for you.